Yes. So again, we're welcome to come together, and come together. It's been going, it started maybe 4 or 5 years ago when we met in person, and it started with congregations coming together, Jody Harpstead, Reverend Paul Slack, and a time for a community to come together and just build and be beloved community. Much of that was in response to the murder of Philando Castile. And, we've just gone through in so many ways that our community has been affected, and, the sabotage of community. And so we gather to claim community, beloved community, and to gather and be in relationship. And so we're so thankful that everyone gathering here tonight, and with wonderful reflection leaders, Yordanos Martin, Kiflu-Martin, who is a marriage and family therapist, and you'll hear so much more about her. She's an incredible person with an incredible child and husband, and Dr. Cheryl Chatman, who is also incredible and has a husband. I wouldn't necessarily say incredible, but he qualifies as a husband anyway. So just so pleased to be together tonight, and look forward to the conversation that Yordanos and Cheryl will lead us in this evening. And so our process for come together is that we begin with this time of welcome and gathering, centering ourselves, and welcoming safety and belonging, centered in beloved community. And we always aspire to have amazing reflection leaders, centering in Black, Brown, BIPOC voices to center us in our reflection time, seeing and hearing from voices that too often are not heard in our everyday experience and culture. And then after the reflection, we have our time of connecting, which is really the secret sauce of come together. When we enter into our reflection time, into the dyad, into the breakout room. And that's not accidental, but the depth of actually going deeper. What did you hear in our conversation? What inspires you? And what will you carry with you beyond our come together reflection time this evening? And then we end with our sending, and we'll share some of the opportunities to continue to do the work of being beloved community. So with that, we begin with our land acknowledgement, which will follow with a moment of silence. So we gather tonight asking the question, how do we build true relationships across difference? And we acknowledge the sacred lands on which we stand. The Center for Leadership and Neighborhood Engagement is located on the ancestral homelands of the Dakota people. And we are in close proximity to the territories of the Anishinaabe and Ho-Chunk peoples. This land has been stewarded as a living relative by the Dakota for generations. The United States government effectively stole this land from the Dakota people through a series of unjust treaties and broken promises, followed by targeted efforts of genocide and ethnic cleansing and forced removal. For this, we repent and we commit to doing better. We took a look now at the Dakota people and all Native American communities as examples of resilience and resistance and strength. We're grateful to have the opportunity to learn and to work in this community on this territory. As we enter into conversations of racial justice tonight, let us remain mindful of these broken covenants and commit to building trust in all of our relations.
I'm going to now share a poem in light of Black History Month. This is to help with our centering. I'm Black History because I have a story about how I can sing free at last. I'm Black history cause I'm Black and bold with a heart of gold, and my integrity and character could never be bought or sold. I'm Black history because I'm alive today when many of my Black sisters passed away. I'm Black history because my family tree consists of those who fought and lived through slavery. I'm Black history because God's glory shines on my legacy will live throughout centuries. I'm Black history because I've been raped, abused, and misused, but none of these left an internal bruised, because I've got to choose to forgive and forget. Instead of a liability, my affliction became my asset. I'm Black history because my lovely fair complexion represents the many shades of Black skin. I'm Black history because I'm outwardly beautiful and within. I am Black history by Shakina Small.
Thank you, Cheryl, for the reading of that poem. It's my pleasure to introduce our reflection leaders for this evening. Yordanos Kiflu-Martin is a vice president of the board for the Center for Leadership and Neighborhood Engagement. She's a graduate of Concordia University. She's a family and marriage therapist. She has a wonderful young child, Zephaniah, and Zephaniah has written and published a book. I think, is he 9 years old? Just an amazing young man. And his father, Yordanos' husband, Tootie Martin. Of course, it's my pleasure also to introduce you, Dr. Cheryl Chatman, former executive vice president at Concordia University in St. Paul and dean for diversity. Dr. Cheryl is very active in the community in St. Paul and AACP, and has involved in African-American women in higher education and a number of community activities. So Cheryl and Yordanos, thank you for being our reflection leaders this evening. And how are you doing?
We're
doing
good.
great. Thank you.
Great.
Bless.
Yeah. I'm wondering if you might begin by sharing some of your educational history. What kind of shaped you? Can you say a little bit, introducing yourself in terms of historical background and maybe, like where were you born? How did you enter into your formation?
Okay. Yeah, well, I'll start with my story. My journey began in East Africa, where I am from, where my parents and family are from, and in Eritrea in East Africa. And we actually had to leave the country because of war. So we actually migrated as first-generation immigrants to the United States when I was 6 years old. So we moved from East Africa to northern Minnesota, a small town, Grand Rapids, Minnesota. And we decided, well, my parents decided to settle there. So that was a drastic change for us, not only the weather, but also the culture and race and understanding aspects of what race relations are in the United States, with the concept of slavery, Jim Crow, and the history of the United States is very different than African countries and what oppression they may have experienced through European colonization in those race relations. So that was a pretty drastic change. I was 6 years old when that happened. I am the youngest of 7 children. So my parents actually decided to locate in Grand Rapids, Minnesota. They could have lived anywhere in the United States, even the Twin Cities. And they've always told us that the main reason was for education. They really wanted us to be somewhere where there were smaller schools, quality education, and they thought the small town environment would be best for us. So even at, our purpose was always spoken about how education was an opportunity that would open a lot of doors for us. So education was at the pivotal aspect of our family and our values, and part of our immigration story as well. I continued to get my master's program in marriage and family therapy. And in sharing this, I'll say this: throughout all my education, even when I went to undergrad and master's program in the Twin Cities, St. Paul, at Concordia University in St. Paul, the first Black teacher I ever had was not until my master's program, when I was in my mid-20s. So consistently being taught by white teachers my whole academic career, and also being in classrooms where I was the only person of color, the only African American or African student most of the time, and then in college being one of the few.
Yes, I'm glad. Yeah, I'm glad Yordanos went first, because I have a nice contrast with where I started and what I experienced during my educational journey. So I was born and raised in Daytona Beach, Florida, which it was really nice to grow up in a small city. And I'm also the youngest of 6. So my education started in all Black schools. And I can talk about this transition that happened from where normally kids transition from middle school to high school. Not only was I transitioning from middle school to high school, but I was transitioning from segregation to integration. And so that was a real interesting experience. I want to talk about what school felt like during segregation. High expectations. I can still name some of the teachers that I had back then because they expected a lot from you and they challenged you. But they also believed you felt and knew that they believed you can do better and that you can do more. And so I was surrounded again, as I said, by these high expectations and then this push and motivation. But I also was involved in so many things. I felt like I fit in, and my leadership skills were starting to be developed. So once it was time to move toward integration, a lot of that flipped. And as I was talking to Yordanos when we were discussing things that we would talk about, it dawned on me that I couldn't remember any of my teachers' names at the predominantly white school. And I thought, I never thought about that. I couldn't remember them. And I thought, why not? I mean, I had 2 or 3 years there. So I moved into the 10th grade. It was an interesting time because the 2 schools were merged and there were efforts to try to equalize things, to try to make sure there were 2 presidents for student government, a white president and a Black president. It was a lot of equalizing, but it's almost a blur, my experiences. I did get involved. I did participate in different things, but it felt like in school or in class, I felt like I was in a fish tank, or I felt like I was being just watched and observed to see, who are these people? Now, the school that I went to, it's not that they didn't have African-American students there before, But I think we got so consumed in what is this new life for us to have more African-American students and things of that sort. So I didn't feel that the expectations of me were high. I think I felt more like, yeah, what can you do? What do you know? So I need to unpack that, and maybe with a therapist or something, to see what was happening with why high school, why my experience at the school now was not as distinct and clear for me as it was when I was at the predominantly Black or all Black school. So I'll pause there.
Right. So I apologize. I'm going to ask you a question or two that we didn't plan on. So as I'm having trouble finding the prepared question. So I'm curious, as Black women, what role did women connecting with other Black women, what was that like for you?
I'll start with the aspect of, you know, my earlier childhood, up until I really moved after high school into the Twin Cities. A lot of that was from my immediate family, my sisters and my mom. That was my real connection with Black women, and also my connection to my Eritrean heritage and culture. And one thing that I specifically remember is my mom and my sisters being very specific about uplifting me, and always encouraging me, not only about my beauty, they did that as well, but also they were very strategic about uplifting my characteristics, my skill sets, and holding me, like Dr. Chatman said, to a higher expectation. So that was really isolated within the home. When I went to college, one of my biggest kind of aha moments was really being in a predominantly white institution for college. You know, my relationship with Dr. Chatman, who was the executive vice president at the time, was really a pivotal moment for me to really succeed. To feel like that space was also could be a part of my space, and not a space that I was just borrowing or didn't fully belong in, but I'm there buying time. So she was another great woman, that Black woman that really connected me to so much of what I didn't get and was missing was provided during those years. And then of course, for me in undergrad, that's really when I got more connected to, you know, the Black student organization, my roommates, some were white, some were Black, but really connected to some lifelong friends who I still have today, and really shaped some of my kind of actively searching out and making those connections and knowing the value of that.
Thank you.
Yeah, I was very fortunate. There were 3 women. I sort of see them as a triangle. My grandmother, my mother, and my aunt. I mean, they were just always there as leaders in the church, in the community. And so they were really strong figures in my life. And then, as I said, when I was at the segregated school, I remember the Black female teachers more so than I do the male teachers, even though I do remember some of the male teachers. But again, I would always get messages from them as, why don't you do this? You could be this, you could do that. So they were always encouraging me to apply for this or try for that or be in this. And so there was encouragement there all along the way. And then in church, my grandmother was the superintendent for 50 years. It's a long time. And so all the leadership modeling was right in my home or right next door or in the community. And being from a small school, and then I would pass the house of the president of the college that I attended, Bethune-Cookman. It was college then and now university. They lived in my neighborhood. One of the things that was so affirming about my development and formation is that the people who taught me were also the people that I saw in my neighborhood, that I would see them in other venues or other situations than just my teacher. So then I could see, you know, where they worshiped and run into them into school, and I mean, stores and things of this sort. So it was almost like the community would go into the school and out of the school. So my relationships with my mentors and so forth didn't just happen in those four walls of the classrooms, but it poured out into the church and the community. And so it was a part of my life. I lived relationships. So.
No, thank you. Another question is, how do you think that some ways that you maybe, as out of your experience, that you uniquely feel inspired to give back? What are some ways that you, out of your journey, that reflects how or what you do for or with others?
I'm letting my daughter go first. Go
ahead. Yeah, for me, as I was reflecting with Mom earlier this week about this, we were thinking, I was sharing with her, I had two specific experiences throughout my high school education experience. One was with a woman school counselor who met with me and didn't know very much about me. She was didn't take the time to get to know me. And I remember this, it was very pivotal for me. And I remember her sitting down and going through my credits and grades. I might have been like in 11th grade. And I remember her saying, well, I don't think college is going to be for you. And that just hit, that always stuck with me, because I thought, well, first in that moment, I was like, this woman doesn't know anything about me, and how dare she, I had all of those responses, but then it stuck with me too, to realize she didn't get a chance to know me. She didn't get a chance to see past maybe my race, maybe how I presented, maybe my story of my family, that I was an immigrant, because the whole town knew us or knew of our story. Maybe her own internalized gender bias, what was me as a woman, as a young lady. And so there was that experience that stuck with me with the aspect of not only, oh, I'm going to show you, I'm going to prove you wrong, that motivation that is there, but also the aspect of she really does not know who I am. And to opposite that, I had a male psychology teacher, and I'm in mental health, that I took advanced placement psychology class. I was just always interested in it. And he was my teacher. And I remember that same year, 11th grade year, he really took the time to see past all of my labels or his own bias about how I was presenting to him. And he was able to see something in me. And I remember him saying, you're really good at this. You have a gift for this. I can see you're really interested in this. And he just encouraged me. He said, you should take it next year. He encouraged me to sign up for this research project that I did. And I actually won an award. And here we are, complete two separate opposites with two white people in my education journey. And the difference is really, one person took the time to connect with my humanity and to understand who I was, before or not only stopping at all the other labels. And that is one of the pivotal moments for me that I also carry in giving back. Whatever the race, gender, whatever may be different, I always try to keep in front of me, how am I really connecting and seeing this person's humanity and really taking space to get to know them. The other aspect of that is I do feel a calling to really uplift other young Black women, specifically in the mental health field. So I do a lot of mentoring, a lot of supervision around that, as we do need representation. Representation not just in the education aspect, but also in the professional aspect. And then knowing that to really be there for one another, because that's a unique perspective, that's a unique support that we need.
Thank you.
I want to do a quick little explanation. The listeners might have heard me refer to Yordanos as my daughter and her as mom. And so Pastor Kelly and I didn't birth kids, but just life will unfold and God will place people in your lives in different ways. And you'll end up playing roles that they weren't designed. You didn't design it to happen that way. I just wanted to insert that, like where this mom daughter thing came in. But I mentioned earlier about my mother, grandmother, and aunt just being models. Like they just gave back all the time. Like my grandmother made sure that every child in the church got a chance to be superintendent, acting superintendent, or that my mom would take me along to go visit people that may have been ill or may have been overlooked or may have been people that people would dismiss. My aunt, I saw her help so many people with writing speeches or doing whatever. It was just like modeling. So I do it without even thinking about it. What I think about is I just have this love and excitement for knowing people. For when I say knowing them, I don't mean just knowing your name, where you're from, all of that. We always get those little logistics. What I mean knowing is being present for things that are happening in your life. And one of the things that I did when I was in, administrator and all the roles is I was present for students. I was present for colleagues. I showed up. Your presence can make or break anything. I mean, it just says so much to a person. What it says is you care, you matter. Whatever is going on in your life, I want to support it. Now, I'm a little hyper. I got a lot of energy. I'm like the ever-ready battery. So I don't expect people to go and do all these things that I just was drawn to do. But you could do it on a smaller scale. You have to, as Yordanos was saying, you have to take time to get to know people. And the only way you're going to do that is to spend time with them or show up where they show up. And it doesn't, you may have other ways checking in with people, but you have to do more than just talk about it. I love somebody made a statement the other day. We have to stop admiring the problem. Like we keep saying, oh, these are the problems. We don't really know people. We don't know what to say. We don't know how to approach them. And we keep spending time on that instead of doing the small little things like showing up, like being present, like getting to know me, ask me some more questions. All right, I'm gonna stop there.
Go ahead, preach, Chuck, preach. So I want to go back to Cheryl, what you just were talking about. I think there is more to, you refer to each other as mom and daughter. So I think there's something more to that, and that, where does that come from for both of you? For Yordanos?
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
And thanks for going back. I would like to elaborate on it. Go ahead, Yordanos, share your perspective first.
Yeah. Well, I'll first broaden it out to African-American, broader culture and how we relate, right? There's a bridge there to history of, we go further together than alone, right? In that community perspective of we are the village, right? And in that, it is very common for us to call our parents' friends or neighbor, auntie or uncle as a form of respect under that aspect of like, we're all one community, right? Even if we're not blood related. So I think there's some context there that really has carried us as a people, right? And then specifically, you know, I think there's this aspect of, you know, Dr. Cheryl Chatman, mom, really became, and not just to me, but to the whole Concordia during, you know, those years that I was there from 2000 to 2004, but the whole 20 years that she was there, 21 years, where to the Black students, we had a lot of Black football players, basketball players, student athletes, African-American students that really were away from their communities and were away from their parents. And, you know, there was a nickname she actually had, Mama Chatman, right? And so she really kind of took us under her wing, because in that environment, she was kind of her office was like a hub for us. If a place where we could come and express, but also get energized or get support or a listening ear from the extra hurdles that we had to navigate that the white students didn't have to, because of the predominant white culture of the institution. And so she really became a hub. And in that sense, you think of a parent, what do, right? They guide you, they correct you, they create safe space for you. They encourage you, they remind you of who you are and your purpose. And so I think her office and her presence and who she was really became that. And not just for me and, you know, having my own personal connection and relationship to her, but also, you know, all the other Black students on campus.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, it's good to hear the other perspective. I was going to say I never went to Concordia and started thinking in my mind, what can I do so that people can look at me as a mom? You know, Pastor Kelly and I love kids, we love youth, we wanted children, and but I didn't go out saying, what can I do? I just did the things that were done to me. I had high expectations of them. As she said, I had a place where there were times where they needed to do homework or they needed to have a place to do their study hall or whatever. My door was open for that. I would extend my time. It wasn't like it was a plan for an end result. It was something that I felt I should naturally do. And that was to care. And I did this, what she described. Yeah, there were white students that came too. It wasn't just for students of color, but I know that they did face some additional challenges. But I treated students the way I was treated, or that I felt like I wanted to be treated when I was a student. But it was just a natural care for. The school always wanted to say what they couldn't do, and we never have done it this way. And I look for reasons to do it. I look for reasons, a different way to do it. And I really wanted to see them succeed. And I think they knew that. So, I mean, I think that's a message that keeps coming through. What is it that you expect? Or what expectations do you have? Do you believe that this person has the potential to be? I don't know what all they're going to be. I had some students who didn't do as well, but we were going to stick together as far as we could go. And I guess I want to share with this group too, this relationship thing, you don't have to control it all. You don't have to plan it all. It doesn't have to be an outline of how to do it. It just has to come from the heart. You know what I mean? It just has to come from your values, and you have to just live out, and you have to get out of the comfort zones, and you have to sacrifice some. And so I wanted to stretch this one more thing to say, interestingly enough, Pastor Kelly married Yordanos and her husband. Now, it started with my relationship with them as students and administrator. And then somehow it channeled its way. Either they liked the connection they had with me, and then when they met him, he ended up marrying not only this couple, but a couple of other couples from Concordia. Again, we didn't plan this and go, how can we get some more people for you to marry? Or how can we get more people to call us mom and dad? It's those beliefs, those values, things that were done to you. And as she said, I've been in predominantly white institutions and so forth. And I had to figure out, how do I make this massive, large place not overwhelming? I did it by small groups, by relationship building with through organizations or through teams or through whatever. But the bottom line is, it's just, where's your heart? And based on what you know is right in your heart, what does that motivate you and drive you to do that really helps to connect and reach someone who could really benefit from your love, your care, your support, all that kind of stuff.
Thank you. So maybe we have enough time. Is there maybe one thing that you would, Dr. Cheryl, you just kind of did it, in terms of what you would say or invite our community gathered in this come together to think about, or as we enter into their breakout?
Yeah, so I guess my parting statements or words for process. Well, before I go there, I'm going to go to one more aspect about mom's role at Concordia. I think there's something to be said again about representation. And, you know, we talk about inclusiveness and equity. Dr. Cheryl Chatman was she was in a position of leadership at the university, and that represented something. To have a Black woman as the vice president really showed, whether it was displayed in other ways or not, it showed in that one way that we were valued. And then her physical presence there, along with her title, also showed that we belonged. When we saw her, there was a sense of connection. So I just wanted to note that piece of representation and why that's important. The other piece that I wanted to say is, as I was reflecting on this, I was thinking throughout my education process and how race has impacted. I think one of the most impactful things is as we talk about bridging that gap, right? And not focusing on the problem. And focusing on what we can do. The thought about, you know, throughout my experience, people were there were critical moments where people were that person that I needed in that moment. They either saw something in me or took the time to learn something about me, or just created a safe space for me. And then as the years went by, there were moments where I was that person for someone else, right? And then as we continue to look into the future, how can I create that for somebody else as well? So you're not only the receiver of it, but you're also the one providing that for someone else.
Thank you.
And some last things that I would like to say. I just want to say that even I can only see a screen of people that at the top and so forth. But from some of those that I could see, even nodding your head. I mean, you get that a lot in the Black church. I mean, when you preach, you're gonna get feedback. Amen, preacher. Even nodding your head, your attention, like your presence here, that's a great start. But be positive, share positive energy, share encouragement. I mean, I'm not saying make someone think they can just be whatever, but if that's what they want, do that. But don't be so much the naysayers, and speak out for stuff. Don't just admire the problem. Don't just say, oh, it's awful that they don't want African-American history studies at an institution, or that they want to not have this books that tell the truth. And what, speak out, whether it's in your family. I know you don't want to get into arguments and debate. Some people you're like, I just don't have the energy. But speak up, speak out, take some action, whether it's one thing, two things, do something. But smile as much as you can smile, nod your head, encourage them, give them that positive energy, and take time to get to know them. Okay, I'm done.
Cheryl, Yordanos, thank you very much. Because this has been a rich time of reflection. We really appreciate you sharing your voice. being heard, bringing yourselves to this come together. There are a couple of things I just want to invite people as we go into our breakout that I heard Cheryl and Yordanos say as an invitation and a challenge, and maybe carry this into your breakout conversation. Cheryl mentioned follow your heart. And in so many ways, Cheryl was saying that in terms of how do you break through the silence that people actually not only see you, but they see your heart. In the midst of so much silence in the midst of injustice, racism, prejudice, whatever, there's way too much silence. And so Cheryl's challenge is, how do people see your heart? Another one that Yordanos and Cheryl lifted up is the influence that leaders of color, BIPOC leaders, Black people, it makes a difference that Black people are in positions of power so that people are able to see people in leadership. So what are you doing? What are we doing with our power, our influence to support that Black people, BIPOC people are in positions of power so that they're being able to be seen, so that people like Dr. Cheryl and Yordanos are able to be those beacons for others, that they will be encouraged. Yes, they do have what it takes to go to college, to get master's degrees, to become therapists and doctors. And then the final question is, Carrie and Tara breakout, how are we not silent? How are we heard to lift up and support the voices of others? So I invite that, and Dan, we may have we have prepared questions, but I would invite, based on what we heard this evening from Cheryl and Yordanos, I would encourage us to lift up those as part of our breakout conversation. So I believe we have 20 minutes for our breakout.
Yeah, let's go 20 minutes of breakout. So Sumner, would you mind bringing up the slide for the breakout rooms? So we did offer up some questions, but I think, you know, what Pastor Kelly is sharing with you as well, might sub one of those in there, but choose the ones that are connecting with you the most. What in tonight's reflection connected with your experience of your education, your experience of you know what the question is about. What challenged you in hearing Dr. Cheryl and Yordanos's experiences? What are you curious about? And then, you know, where can you use your voice? How can you refuse to be silent? So we're going to put you into breakouts for 20 minutes, groups of 3 or 4. And the guidelines that we have for these rooms, make sure to introduce yourself. That's step 1 in a relationship, right? Choose any other questions from the list that mean something to you. Be a listener. Focus on listening well and being present. And that means making sure that people get, you know, something like equal amount of time to share. Speak from your experience. We recommend, you know, reminding yourself with I statements. It's our experiences is what connects with one another. So with that, any other advice, PK? Otherwise, we'll go into our rooms.
No, enjoy your breakout and time together. And again, thank you, Yordanos, and thank you, Cheryl. We'll come back together after the breakout and have opportunity for more reflection.
You may be hurting all the
Joe Dave.
Show up, we'll gather healing along the way.
Oh, I know that song.
Show up, we will be strong, we will be brave. Show up, dream of the world we will create.
And who is this show? Who's the musician?
Show up.
Oh, that,
You can cry here.
but you know that's
Take your time here.
Joe Davis. Is that
To be
he
you is
normally
not
does
the
that song?
crime
That's
here.
his song, yeah.
We are all
Yeah.
divine here.
That's Joe's
We
group.
shine brighter
Welcome
when we
back,
all shine
everyone.
here. We
Okay.
rise higher when we all rise here. We practice being kind here.
As we regather,
We
we
celebrate the fact
love
that we
you
are
to
still
share
alive
some of
here.
your comments in
We can
the
make mistakes
chat.
here. No guilt, blame, or shame here. There's
And
only grace
also we'll
here.
have some
You
time
know
where
by
you'll be
name
able
here.
to ask
We've been waiting for you. So
Cheryl
glad that you
and
came here.
Yordanos
We hope that you
questions or
stay here.
uh,
All that you are can be reclaimed
what
and
was
embraced here.
stimulated your conversation during the chat. We welcome you back as we regather.
Show up, we will be strong, we will be brave. Show up, dream of the world we will create. Show up, well, the
So wonderful to
days
be
are
together
long
to
and the
Everybody else.
center
nights are
ourselves.
long.
And
If it feels
again,
too hard
we
to
invite you
keep
to share any
moving
comments or questions that you may have in the
dawn
chat
is coming
as we
soon,
gather,
you
as
gotta
you
keep
add
your
conversation
love
around the
and
questions that were asked.
believe. We may be hurting
What
on this
stirred for
day.
you?
Show up, we'll gather eating
And if
along
you
the
if you want to ask of
way.
Cheryl and Yordanos' question,
Show up, we will
raise
be
your
strong,
hand,
we will be
and
brave.
Rachel, Anna, we will
Show up,
help
dream of the world we will
invite your
create.
question.
Show up, you
Hello,
may be
Aaron.
hurting
Good to
on this
see you.
day.
So
Show
wonderful.
Okay,
up, we'll gather
Maggie
eating
has her hand
along
up.
the
She's got a question, so maybe we
way.
can, yeah, thank you. Maggie, you should be able to unmute yourself. There you go.
Well, it's not really a question, but I just want to admire Cheryl's, don't just admire the problem. Speak up and speak out. That inspired me. And also the reminder to nod and smile while you're in the audience. Coming from my really quiet Norwegian background, you're supposed to not move. Don't distract in any way. So thanks. Thank you. Thank you both. It was really nice.
Thank you, Maggie. Questions, comments? You can raise your hand and speak directly to Cheryl and Yordanos, or make your comment or question in the chat.
Carol noted in the chat also the importance of positively supporting and reinforcing others. So the head nod and the smile and just being there to do that. Thank you, Carol. Monique, you should be able to unmute yourself. Thank you.
Well, I loved Cheryl when you spoke about just showing up, be there for people. And that's the biggest thing I'm going to take away. We can talk till the cows come home, but it doesn't do anything to make a change. So showing up is what I'm going to keep doing. Thank you.
We have a question in Zoom for Dr. Cheryl. What brought Dr. Cheryl to Minnesota from Florida?
That is a great question, because I would like people to know I don't like cold weather. So I'm going to blame it on Pastor Kelly the first time I came to cold Minnesota. Then the second time, I want to answer that in a real, that was my funny way of answering, but I now want to answer it in a spiritual way. There was a time that when I was in Chicago, hoping to move further south, I remember saying a quick prayer, just loosely. I was just like, use me, God. I just threw it out there. It was in the midst of some things at work, and I just wanted God to use me and remind me why I was where I was. What I forgot to say was use me in warm climate. So here I am in Minnesota. But I'd say that I would never want to limit God. Our jobs, Kelly's job brought us here the first time, and then I was offered a job the second time. So I don't plan to spend the remainder of my life in Minnesota. So I'm hoping that we're going to relocate to a warmer climate. But I think I left myself open to God, and that's how I ended up coming back to Minnesota.
Janet has a question.
I just want to comment on how powerful it was, Yordanos, to hear you talk about the white person that discouraged you and the other white person that saw you and encouraged you. And I think that it's important for me to realize that by listening, by wanting to know more about people, by seeing them, it can have a bigger impact than I'm even aware of. So that was really important to hear that part of your story. Thank you.
Thank you, Janet. I'm glad that resonated with you, and sharing that. I know for me, my takeaway was also in sharing that with the group to really say, you know, sometimes like what Dr. Chatman was saying was, you know, we focus on the problem, right? What can I do with my anti-racism work, or what can I do? I'm just one person, but that aspect of we're all capable, right? If we allow God to use us and not limit ourselves.
Mhm.
Don, did you have a question?
I've been in lots of book discussions, Zoom meetings, and done a little reading about the civil rights movements in the 50s and 60s. And it seems to me that one of the things that happened is that congregations, you know, pastors and other people got together and they came up with concrete plans of how to make changes. And I'm wondering, how can we come up with some concrete plans to deal with the issues that we face? You know, we do a lot of talking, and we have Bible studies and we have prayers, but I'm wondering if we need to develop more concrete plans. And I don't have the answers, but there's a lot of people here today smarter than me.
And I think the CLNE, I could respond, but I think CLNE could respond to that too. Pastor Kelly, you got a response?
You are the reflection leaders. I'll give you first shot at it.
Okay. I think what I would say is, I think I have to start with these more honest conversations. I mean, just what you shared with us, even making that kind of comment within your own church, because I think everything is going to work differently, or can work differently with each individual, with each small group, with each congregation. But I think I'm a part of an organization. I'm always asking the question, what next? You know, how do we move to the next point and the next step? So whatever your unique gifts and passion and interests or concerns are, you know, to put those out there and utilize that gift that God has given you to motivate people to take the next step, and start having those dialogues. What are some things, and if we don't have the answers, what do we need to do to move forward, to go beyond just praying? I mean, we never want to stop praying, and to go beyond just the studies, and to go beyond just the comments. So yeah, I just urge everyone to push the envelope for more action, for at least one step, the next step, or the next plan. But say that to your congregation. Say that to a small group. It only takes a spark to get the fire going.
Jackie Schluter, you can come off of mute.
Thank you for pronouncing my name correctly. That never happens.
You're welcome.
You got my last name perfectly.
Just how it's spelled.
Sorry. Thank you. I appreciate that. In our group, we just talked about the importance of the teachers that Yordanos was heard from, and of course those were leadership voices, but also kind of piggybacking on what Dr. Chatman just said in response to Don, that it's all kinds of conversations, and that you never know what your words mean to someone or how they're going to stick. And just being really intentional when you're talking to the cashier that's across from you, that's a relationship and an opportunity to, as Dr. Chatman again said, to share your heart and to not be silent. And so I'm really thinking a lot about that tonight and being intentional in those ways. So thank you both for igniting that a little bit more.
I'd like to go back to Don, your statement, which is pretty important about your grappling with the aspect of, you know, concrete, right? I want concrete steps. I want concrete action. I would pause and first think about, well, how do we define concrete, right? Because it's going to look different for each of us, depending on the situation we're at, where we're at in our path, our individual path or progress, whether it be with social justice or understanding our own internal bias. Or organizationally, right? That's going to shift depending on what institution or system we're in, right? So really taking a pause to say, well, what's concrete for us? What is a concrete action step for me? And really defining that and naming it. And the other part is also, I'm thinking of, you know, being one of the board members for CLNE. A lot of our work is around asset-based driven change, right? And when we think about asset-based driven change, we also think about what's the larger ecosystem, right, of change or action. And that could be things like, you know, how I vote, how I spend my money, not only how I interact individually with people and relationally and building that relationship, but also what kind of voice do I bring to the table when we are at the decision table? What kind of, you know, am I aware of what disparities are around? So I always think of that kind of ecosystem approach when I think of action steps.
Cheryl, you had your hand up a moment ago, and then Jimbo after.
Okay.
Next.
Okay, I'll just make it. I have that the next step approach has been very important in the work that I've done with students at Metropolitan State, and also in other facets. And sometimes the enormity of the challenges seem so large, but what has been helpful is to think, I have this little phrase, we can't all do something about everything, but we can all do something about something. And I try to help connect people, including myself, not just to try to do things alone, but to connect with groups or even, you know, 2 or 3 other people so that you have a little bit of strength and support and feedback for those next steps. So you're not just doing them in a vacuum. So that's all I guess I will say for now.
Here, anybody want to respond? Otherwise, Jimbo, you could come off of mute and share.
Yeah, we could. No, I mean, good point. So yeah, we can move to Jimbo. Yeah.
Jimbo, there you go.
Okay, I was taking 3 deep breaths, waiting for someone to respond.
Good practice.
So I'm glad that Don, you asked that question. And just before you asked that question, I was looking around and noticing how few men are in this discussion tonight. And I'm accustomed to sitting in circles of men with the Twin Cities Men's Center. So it's quite a contrast. And for next month, rather than say, oh, I think I'll attend that, I will, as soon as I receive the invitation, I will say, I think I'll attend that, and I'll invite Chris and Sean and Martin and a dozen other men. I know many tender-hearted men who would love to sit with you and listen to you and be with you. And then addressing your question, Don, we as a group, this group right here, we don't have to reinvent the wheel. I'll just post 2 organizations that are already doing great work. Pastor, oh gosh, what's his name now? With the Poor People's Campaign.
William Barber.
Yes, Pastor William Barber is doing incredibly beautiful work. And Alight, which is right here in the Twin Cities, is befriending and helping refugees from Ukraine. The Minnesota Council of Churches has been taking in refugees from the continent of Africa and recruiting people to help them learn their neighborhood. Where's the grocery store? Where's the hardware store? There's plenty to do right here. And I consider your kind eyes and your tender hearts to be support for me doing that kind of work in the community.
Thank you, Jimbo. And I saw the link you posted in the chat too. Thanks. PK, do we have time? Richard's got his hand up. So maybe one more? Or,
yeah, let's do one more.
Okay, thanks.
One of the things that, if you want to do something concrete right away, Michael Eric Dyson, I think some of you know who he is. I heard him on the news one time, and he said, one thing you can do regarding reparations, obviously Black people under slavery suffered a great economic loss over the years. And he said, one thing you can do as an individual is when you are waited on by a Black person, give them a larger tip in a restaurant. And I did that one time at Olive Garden. This Black guy brought out my food. I did takeout and I gave him a large tip. So that's an action you can take by yourself right away. You don't have to wait. So.
Thank you, Richard, and thank you, everyone. A rich conversation. Thank you, Cheryl and Yordanos, for your wonderful leadership as reflection leaders tonight. And I just want to kind of pull this together again and say thank you for gathering as a community. And one of the things when I think about, Don, your great question, is the opportunity that so often gets missed of white people to hear and see Black people in their leadership and their voice.
Amen.
And that's not only a gift for white people, but it's a gift for Black and brown and marginalized people to be lifted up and celebrated for their voice and their leadership. And I just think that really does enrich our community when everybody is seen and heard. And that's been a deficit in our nation, which is stigmatized and made invisible the gifts of a Cheryl or Yordanos for way too long. And so again, thank you, Yordanos and Cheryl, for sharing the gift that you are with our community. And we just look forward to next time and that our community may continue to share that blessing with others.